Joining us now, Chairman, Republican Party of Virginia, with a rebuttal, John Whitbeck. Hey, John, good to have you with us.
Hey, John, how are you?
Okay, let me just start out with this, get this right off the bat. I am unequivocally supporting John Whitbeck for re-election of chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia. We may disagree on certain issues, but John has done an outstanding job in taking the Republican Party of Virginia out of the depths of $100,000 of debt and basically no organization making it into something. So I will be supporting him for re-election, even though on this particular issue, I think he's ridiculously wrong. John, why go to the State Board of Elections and institute this nefarious, ridiculous exclusionary pledge that people have to sign a statement of affiliation or an oath or whatever this is in blood or whatever you guys have it, when they simply go in and say, may I please have a Republican ballot so I can participate in the process and in your party? Why would you turn them away?
Well, first of all, John, this is something that happens in almost every nominating process in the Republican Party. I mean, we have consistently maintained that our party's official position has always been we want Republicans selecting the Republican nominee. And if we had held a convention, which so many people supported and so many people have attacked, you would have had to sign a statement of intent to support not only the Republican Party, but the nominee. And our party rules require that there be some sort of screening to ensure that members of other political parties don't skew the results of our process. And so this state law allows for this, and we decided as a state central committee, which, regardless of my personal opinion on it, I have to do what their vote tells me to do. We decided to do this, and I think it's going to work real well.
Well, I don't think it is. I think it's a disaster. And as far as giving me as bringing a convention, that's a completely false choice. You guys, your steering committee or your central committee, voted for a primary. If you voted for a convention, then it's your rules, and you play by the Republican Party of Virginia's rules in order to participate in the convention. A primary is run by the State Board of Elections. That's number one. Number two is the argument about, there's no Republican Party registration. That's up to the General Assembly, John, and they have never been able to get that even out of committee. So our elected representatives have not said that's something that their constituents want. If it is, it would have already passed. Obviously, it isn't. So we have an open primary process in Virginia. The thing that is infuriating me is you guys are 0 for 7. You've lost 7 consecutive statewide races. The state is about to turn blue in 16 if you get beat another time, coupled with the fact you can't possibly win in November without Virginia. Why would you do anything to turn off, discourage, or otherwise turn away independents or people that haven't participated in the process for some time, or conservative Democrats that might want to change over? Why would you do anything but encourage them to get involved? How does this make any sense?
You know, John, what would you say if we did have party registration? Do you know that in order to vote in many of these states' primaries that have party registration, you must declare and register as a Republican before you can participate?
Sure.
And to your point about the party selected a primary to a primary, the state law is very clear. There is a political primary that can be held in presidential years that is different from any other state-run primary in Virginia. It has different rules. It has a separate statute dedicated solely to this process, and it has all kinds of different things that can happen, including the statement of intent as part of it. So when the State Central Committee did select a primary, it selected a primary in a presidential year that provides for this type of screening to ensure that Democrats are not voting in our process. And let me tell you, it's a coronation going on the other side. Hillary Clinton is going to be the nominee anybody who's voting for Bernie Sanders, needs to just wake up and smell the coffee. He is not going to be the nominee. It is going to be Hillary Clinton. So Democrats are going to be tempted to come in and vote for what they perceive to be the weakest candidate. And everybody knows that the data that we get from these primaries is very critical because we don't have party registration. We have to use the primary to identify who the Republicans are. We are able to use this process to screen out those Democrats. Because I hear it all the time. People knock on doors and they go, I was knocking doors and you had them listed as a hardcore Republican in your data system, but they were telling me they were Democrats and they had a Terry McAuliffe sign in their yard. What's up with our data? Well, this is an opportunity for us to finally get a clean data plan that shows us exactly who the Republicans are, because that's what the primary is about. Republicans selecting the Republican nominee. This is not the time for us to be trying to reach out to Democrats and say, hey, Democrats, you come in and decide who our nominee is. The time for that's the general election. And I'll make another point, John. Do you know that this was sent to all the campaigns back in early September? It's been out there for months, and you're just now picking up on it. It has been out there for months, and nobody's had a problem with it on our side. None of the campaigns have expressed any problem with it up until now, and there's only one campaign that has a problem with it. So this has been out there, and here we are again, just like the candidate statement that your guy ultimately signed, all of a sudden becomes an issue when we put it on the agenda, even though it's been out there for years in our party rules. John. So I think this is much ado about nothing, and I just think the State Central Committee has spoken, and we're going to go forward.
I think, you know what, John, I got to say, in all due respect, what you just said is absolute hogwash. I mean, I can't believe, I can't believe you just said that. First of all, there is no evidence throughout the last 5 decades to show that any number of Democrats or Republicans came into either's primary and disrupted anything. Zero.
That's just factually incorrect. That's just factually incorrect.
It's never over
2011. That's factually incorrect. In 2011, Operation Chaos, initiated by Rush Limbaugh and other radio talk show hosts, led to a lot of Republicans voting the Democratic process, and that was wrong too. Well, we should not be voting in their primary. They should not be voting on ours.
We have an open primary process in Virginia. That's the way the General Assembly said it. And what you guys are trying to do,
not in a presidential year. You didn't listen. Read the code.
I don't care what the code says, John. There's the code.
You don't care what the law says? No, I do.
The law.
I care what the law says.
You're taking advantage of an obscure law in the SBE code. I'm talking about principle and what makes sense. And you're lawyering up on me. You're lawyering up on me and saying, well, it's
I'm not lawyering up on you.
You're lawyering up. It doesn't make any sense.
Were you in Virginia in 2000? Were you living in Virginia in the year 2000?
Yeah, you guys have to take it off. You guys have to take it off the table.
Guess what?
Yeah, take it off the table.
Guess what? There was a statement of intent in 2000, and it was the highest turnout election in a primary in Virginia history until the Obama-Clinton in 2008. So there's no evidence. There's no evidence that this has reduced the vote in any way, and it's not going to do it in this instance.
It has nothing to do with data mining or anything else, because simply by virtue of the more people who participate in your primary on March 1st, they have to ask for a Republican ballot. It's flagged. Then through the State Board of Elections what primary they voted in. The Democrats have their own primary that day, and it's not up to you basically to decide what they're going to do. What you're telling is independents or other people not to participate in your primary because it's rigged. That's really all it is. This wouldn't even have come up if Donald Trump was not on the ballot, and you guys are scared to death of the fact that he's bringing brand new people into the system, independents into the system, and getting people to participate that haven't participated forever. And so what happens if somebody shows up and shows their ID and says, I would like to vote, sir, can I have a Republican ballot? And that person says, well, in order to have that, you have to sign all this stuff, sign in blood, sign this pledge, emails, phone numbers, all this stuff, in order for me to give you the ballot. What happens when that individual says, no, I'm not comfortable with that? Are you going to send them home?
This is, you keep making the point.
Are you going to send them home? John, answer my question. Are you going to send them home?
You said about 15 things in that monologue, so I get to respond the way I want to respond. And the first thing I'll say is, you keep going back to this notion that somehow this is about one campaign or one candidate.
Absolutely,
it's not. And the evidence is clear, and you know it. As I told you, on September 8th, your candidate was sent this information. It was sent just like every other campaign. They got everything. This was even before it was implemented. We are exploring the possibility of this. What do you think? They didn't respond. That's not our problem. The other campaigns saw fit to respond and said, we're fine with this. And they don't have to respond. That's up to them. But to say this is about one candidate is just, come on. It really is not at all accurate. If that were true, then we would have snuck this through in a backroom deal, and that's not all what happened. It was open, it was transparent.
You did sneak it
through. No, we didn't.
Knew about
it was an open meeting. Your candidate was given notice, and they chose not to respond. There's nothing I can do about that.
Look, I checked with the campaign, and they told me they were not in favor of this, and that saying that they were or that they said nothing was an outright lie. But look, I'm not affiliated with the campaign, so I'm not going to comment on that. But to say that this thing was in the open and transparent, you got to be kidding me. You've got 70 or 80 unelected people making this decision and then slipping it in at the final minute. What do you mean this is a transparent process? Get back to my question. Somebody shows up.
It was done in September. This is months ago. This wasn't done like a week ago.
Did you guys put out a release? Did you guys tell the media?
The State Board of Elections put this out because this was their approval process. It had already been voted on back in September of 2015, months ago. I'm sorry that you didn't do anything about it or say anything about it then.
No one saw it, John. Outside of your 90 people, no one saw it.
Your campaigns did. All the campaigns did. Your candidate did. Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush and Carl, they all got just like they've gotten everything. We have been over-communicating with the campaigns. There are 13 of them on the ballot in part because we helped them get their processes together, help them with answering questions, help their attorneys, and we've gotten glowing reviews from all of them about how easy the process has been, how accommodating we've been, including, before we even act on things, sending them all this information. They got everything handed to them. And you know what? The party hadn't done that in the past, and that's a shame. That's why, part of the reason we only had 2 people on the ballot. But we have 13 people on the ballot that are going to be competing in Virginia. We're going to have more people voting in this primary probably than the history of Virginia politics. And there's no way that a statement of intent that simply asks you to confirm you're a Republican doesn't bind you to supporting the nominee ultimately, which is what people have been so upset about in the past. We are going to have more people. We're probably going to clear 1 million people in this because we have so many people competing, and the Republican Party of Virginia has played a big part in that like never before. And that's something we should be proud of. And Republicans will select the Republican nominee.
Well, maybe if you didn't have this stupid pledge, you'd have 1.5 million, and maybe you would actually win in November instead of being 0 for 7. John, I'm going to get back to my question. I'm an independent or a conservative Democrat or somebody that hasn't been involved. Whatever. I'm not part of your establishment process. I go in and I say, may I have a Republican ballot? And the person says to me, sign this form or you can't have it. And the person looks at it and says, I'm not really comfortable signing anything. Are you going to send them home or not?
Well, we don't administer this. This is the State Board of Elections that we select the process. We select the circumstances surrounding it, and the State Board of Elections is the one that does this. And in terms of your question, this has not been resolved to a point yet where I can say definitively whether that will occur or not. But as of right now, the State Board of Elections decided that this was going to be a prerequisite to voting. In other words, signing a statement in order to get a ballot.
So you're going to allow a State Board of Election official to terminate the right to participate in your primary and send home a potential Republican voter. You're going to turn this over to a third party to send a Republican primary voter home packing because they don't want to sign your pledge on primary day. Are you kidding me, John? Are you insane? You guys are trying to expand the party, and you're going to tell people that show up who say, can I have a Republican ballot? and you're going to turn this over to a third party who says you have to sign this, and the individual says, I'm just not comfortable signing anything, then you have to go home. You can't vote in our primary. But if you would still like to participate, here's a Democrat ballot. They don't require you to sign anything. This is the most insane thing I've ever heard of in my life.
Well, you've come to all of our conventions. You've seen this done 1,000 times.
That's a convention. This is not a problem.
The only reason you're losing your mind over it is because you think that it impacts your candidate disproportionately, which just isn't true.
Absolutely. The whole thing is designed to stop Trump.
Oh,
just
come on.
Beat him, John. Just one beat him.
Beat him, John. For crying out loud. You know what? That is the most absurd statement that's been made in the entire exchange. That somehow we were targeting one candidate. That's absurd, and you know it.
You guys,
come on, I'm not going to dignify that with a response. That's just a temper tantrum.
Because you don't have a response. I've had a response for every one of your arguments.
My response is that's absurd.
And you don't have a response.
You know that's absurd. You know it's absurd. You're just trying to increase the anger of your listeners out there and get them all riled up.
My listeners are not angry.
That's absurd. We're not targeting any particular campaign. That's ridiculous. Absurd, and it's beneath you to say it. It's beneath you to say it.
Drop the pledge.
The State Central Committee has already voted. It's already voted. It's made its decision. It's my job as chairman to protect the party and to do the will of the elected representatives on the state party.
Okay, rather than hide behind your State Central Committee, how does John Whitbeck stand on this issue? Should there be a pledge, and are you in favor of turning away potential Republican primary voters on March 1st and telling them to go pound sand?
Well, first of all, I reject the premise of your question completely. We have treated all 14 of the candidates fairly and equally. All 13 of the candidates that ended up on the ballot were either in support of the pledge or didn't raise objections, period. If any of them, if a single one had said, hey, we're really concerned about this and we want to talk to you about it, we would have sat down and made accommodations for it. But either they didn't respond or they said, hey, this is great. We're so good. We're fine with it. And so the State Central Committee, with knowing that we had that either silence or consent, went forward and made this forward. We could have just voted on it and not checked with the campaigns and not done anything with it, but we didn't do that because that's what we haven't done the entire time. Every campaign has been treated fairly and equally. We've been communicating with them repeatedly. They've all gotten the benefit of knowing before the filing deadline whether their signatures were going to be certified. We've given them all of our rules, everything up front. We've invited them to our meetings. We've sat down with them. We've met with them. We sent this on September 8th to the national political director of the Trump campaign. I have the email. It was there. They got just as much notice as everybody else, and the process has been fair. And I'll tell you what, we are going to completely and transparently conduct this process going forward, just the way we've done it. And to say it was targeting one particular campaign is ridiculous. It's absurd, and there's no way you can back that up with any hard evidence. And so I would stop saying it before you look silly.
Well, John, you know what? At least I've answered your questions. You've not answered two of my questions. You didn't tell me whether or not you were in favor of this thing as chairman and showed leadership on it one way or the other. And the second thing you haven't answered is if my producer, Courtney Banks, who's an independent, goes in and asks for a Republican ballot and you make her sign something and she says, I'm not comfortable with it, are you going to send her home?
I've answered both those questions, John, and I don't know why you keep saying that.
Because
let me ask you this: what is your candidate and those candidates that may oppose this, even though we haven't heard from any that do? What are they going to do in the states where there's party registration? And
that's
you can't vote.
If you want party registration, go to the General Assembly. They can't get the thing done out of committee. John, I'm out of time. You keep changing the argument and lawyering up on me. I'm sorry I kicked your butt on this argument. I'm still going to vote for your re-election for chairman. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. I'll be right back.